The day my ex-husband called me a failure, I was standing in a grocery store parking lot with only $12 in my purse. $12. Not 1,200. Not even 50. Just 12 crumpled dollars, a nearly empty tank of gas, and a heart that felt like it had been stepped on too many times. I remember staring at my phone after his message came through. "You always dream too big, Emma. Look where that got you." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. Because a part of me believed him. I had lost my marriage. I had lost my home. I had lost the small bakery business I once loved. And I was working late shifts at a diner, smiling at strangers while trying not to cry in the bathroom during my breaks. At that moment, I truly thought my life was over. But what my ex-husband didn't know is this. Sometimes, the person who calls you a failure is only speaking from the place where they stopped believing in you. And sometimes, life gives you a chance to become everything they said you never could. My name is Emma Carter, and this is the story of how the man who once looked down on me ended up seeing my face on the cover of a magazine. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally learned how to stop begging for someone else's approval. When I met Daniel, I was 24 years old and full of hope. I had just finished culinary school, and I worked mornings at a tiny bakery called Sweet Magnolia. The place smelled like cinnamon, butter, and fresh bread. I loved it more than anything. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise, tied my apron around my waist, and started making pastries before the city was even awake. I had dreams back then. Big dreams. I wanted to own my own bakery one day. Not some fancy chain with polished floors and expensive signs. I wanted a warm little place with wooden tables, fresh flowers by the windows, and people who came in not just for coffee, but for comfort. I wanted to create a place that felt like home. Daniel thought it was cute. That was the word he always used. "Your little bakery dream is cute," he would say, smiling as if he was being supportive. At first, I didn't mind. I thought he loved me. I thought he believed in me. He was charming, confident, and successful. He worked in real estate and always seemed to know what to say. He drove a nice car, wore expensive watches, and had a way of making everyone around him feel like he was the smartest person in the room. When he asked me out, I felt lucky. Looking back, I realized I was too busy feeling lucky that someone like him wanted me to notice how often he made me feel small. We got married 2 years later. At first, everything seemed fine. We moved into a beautiful apartment downtown. Daniel picked most of the furniture because he said I had too much of a cozy style. He chose the colors, the artwork, even the kind of dishes we used. I didn't argue. I told myself it didn't matter. But little by little, I stopped recognizing my own life. I stopped wearing bright dresses because Daniel said they made me look childish. I stopped talking about opening a bakery because he said businesses fail all the time. I stopped meeting my old friends because he said they were holding me back. And every time I tried to stand up for myself, he would sigh and say, "Emma, why do you always make things difficult?" So I learned to stay quiet. I learned to shrink. I learned to become the version of myself that made him comfortable. For years, I convinced myself that was love. Then one night, everything changed. It was our 5th wedding anniversary. I had spent all day preparing dinner. I made Daniel's favorite meal, set candles on the table, and even bought him a watch strap he had mentioned weeks before. I was nervous because I wanted the night to be perfect. Daniel came home almost 2 hours late. He didn't apologize. He walked in, loosened his tie, and looked at the table like it was an inconvenience. "What is all this?" he asked. "Our anniversary dinner," I said softly. He looked at the candles, then at me. "Emma, I told you I had a meeting." "You didn't tell me," I replied. "Yes, I did." "No, Daniel, you didn't." He stared at me for a moment, and I could see irritation growing in his eyes. Then he laughed. Not a warm laugh. A cold one. "Of course you'd turn this into a problem." I felt my chest tighten. "I'm not trying to make it a problem. I just wanted to spend time with you." He threw his keys onto the counter. "You're always so needy." That word stayed with me. Needy. I had cooked him dinner. I had waited for him. I had wanted one night with my husband. And somehow I was needy. That night, we barely spoke. The candles burned down. The food got cold. And I sat alone at the table, wondering how I had become so lonely while being married. A few months later, Daniel told me he wanted a divorce. He said we had grown apart. He said I wasn't ambitious enough. He said I didn't fit into the life he wanted anymore. But the truth was, Daniel had already found someone else. Her name was Vanessa. She was younger, stylish, successful, and worked at the same real estate company as him. When I found out, I expected to feel angry. Instead, I felt empty. Like someone had taken everything inside me and left nothing behind. The divorce was quick. Daniel kept the apartment. He kept most of the furniture. He even kept the car because it was in his name. I walked away with a suitcase, a few boxes, and a bank account that barely had enough money for rent. I moved into a small studio apartment above an old laundromat. The walls were thin. The heater barely worked. And every night, I could hear the machines downstairs spinning like they were reminding me that life kept moving, even when mine felt frozen. I went back to work at Sweet Magnolia. But the bakery was struggling. A large chain cafe had opened across the street, and fewer customers came in every week. The owner, Mrs. Harper, tried her best, but eventually she had to close the shop. The day she told us, I cried in the storage room. It felt like losing the last piece of myself. After that, I took a job at a diner called Rosie's. It wasn't glamorous. I wore a plain uniform, served pancakes and coffee, and worked double shifts whenever I could. Some nights, I came home so tired that I slept in my clothes. But I kept going. Because I had no choice. And that was when Daniel sent me that message. "You always dream too big, Emma. Look where that got you." I didn't reply. I wanted to. I wanted to tell him how cruel he was. I wanted to remind him that I had loved him when he had nothing but a tiny office and a borrowed suit. But instead, I put my phone in my bag and went back inside the diner. A woman at table 6 needed more coffee. A little boy had dropped his fries. A couple near the window was arguing quietly. And life kept moving. A few weeks later, something happened that changed everything. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, and the diner was almost empty. An older woman came in wearing a long gray coat and a red scarf. She sat alone in a booth near the window. She looked tired. Not physically tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying too much sadness for too long. I brought her coffee and asked if she wanted to see the menu. She looked up at me and smiled faintly. "Do you have anything sweet?" she asked. I laughed softly. "Not much. But I can make you a cinnamon toast plate. It's not on the menu." Her eyes brightened. Cinnamon toast sounds perfect. I went into the kitchen and made it the way my mother used to make it for me when I was little. Thick bread, butter, cinnamon, sugar, and a little drizzle of honey. When I placed it in front of her, she took one bite and closed her eyes. "Oh," she whispered. "This tastes like childhood." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. We started talking. Her name was Margaret Ellis. She was a retired editor from a lifestyle magazine called Modern Living. She had recently lost her husband, and she came to the diner because she didn't like eating alone at home. For the next few weeks, Margaret became a regular. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she sat in the same booth. And every time, I made her something small and sweet that wasn't on the menu. Apple turnovers. Chocolate chip scones. Lemon cake. Mini blueberry muffins. I started baking again in my tiny apartment at night. At first, I did it only for Margaret. But soon, other customers noticed. "What is that?" they would ask. "Can I have one too?" The diner owner, Rosie, saw people asking for my pastries and told me I could start bringing a few to sell. I was nervous. I didn't think anyone would buy them. But the first day I brought 12 muffins, they sold out in less than an hour. The next day, I brought 20. They sold out too. Then 30. Then 50. Rosie asked me if I wanted to create a small dessert menu for the diner. I almost said no. Not because I didn't want it. Because I was afraid. Afraid to hope again. Afraid to fail again. Afraid that Daniel's voice would be right. But Margaret looked at me one afternoon and said something I will never forget. Emma, you keep talking about failure as if it is a place you live in. It isn't. It's only a moment you pass through. I stared at her. She continued, you have talent. But more than that, you have heart. People can taste heart in food. Don't waste that gift because one man didn't know how to value it. That night, I went home and cried. Not because I was sad. Because for the first time in years, someone had made me feel seen. I started working harder than I ever had before. I woke up at 4 in the morning to bake before my diner shift. I spent nights testing recipes in my tiny kitchen. I watched videos about business plans, food costs, packaging, and social media. I made mistakes. A lot of them. I burned batches of cookies. I ruined frosting. I spent money on ingredients that didn't sell. I had days when I wanted to give up. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered Margaret's words. Failure is only a moment you pass through. Within 6 months, my little dessert menu at Rosie's had become popular. People came in asking for Emma's cinnamon rolls. A local food blogger posted a photo of my strawberry shortcake online, and suddenly people from other parts of the city started coming in. Rosie gave me a small corner of the diner kitchen just for baking. Then she offered me something I never expected. Why don't you take over the empty shop next door? She asked. I looked at her like she was joking. The shop next door had been empty for years. It was small, dusty, and needed a lot of work. I can't afford it, I said. Rosie smiled. You don't have to pay me right away. We can work something out. I didn't know what to say. She had seen me at my lowest. She had watched me work double shifts, cry quietly in the back room, and show up every day anyway. And now she was giving me a chance. So I said yes. The next few months were the hardest and happiest of my life. I painted the walls myself. My cousin helped me build shelves. Margaret brought me old framed photographs from her home. Rosie gave me a secondhand coffee machine. My coworkers collected money and bought me a small sign for the front window. It said, Emma's oven baked with heart. The day we opened, I was terrified. I stood behind the counter with shaking hands, waiting for customers. For the first hour, no one came. I started panicking. Then a woman walked in with her daughter. She bought 2 cupcakes. Then a man came in for coffee. Then 3 college students came in because they saw a post online. By noon, there was a line outside. By the end of the day, I had sold almost everything. I went home that night and sat on the floor of my apartment, still wearing flour on my shirt. And I cried. But this time, I cried because I was proud. A year later, Emma's Oven had become one of the most loved bakeries in the city. We weren't huge. We weren't fancy. But we were real. People came in after breakups, after job interviews, after funerals, after weddings. Mothers brought their children. Old couples shared pie at the window. Students studied with coffee and cookies. I learned something important during that time. People don't always remember what you say, but they remember how you make them feel. And I wanted my bakery to make people feel safe. Then one morning, Margaret came into the bakery holding a magazine. She looked excited. I have a surprise for you, she said. I smiled. What is it? She placed the magazine on the counter. It was Modern Living. And on the cover was a photo of me. Me, standing in front of Emma's Oven, holding a tray of cinnamon rolls, smiling like someone who had finally found her way back to herself. The headline read, From starting over to sweet success, the woman behind Emma's Oven. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My hands started shaking. Margaret reached across the counter and held my hand. I wrote the story, she said quietly. You deserve to be seen. I hugged her so tightly that we both started crying. The article talked about my journey. Not just the bakery, but the pain behind it. The divorce. The diner job. The tiny apartment. The fear. The hope. It didn't make me look perfect. It made me look human. And that meant more to me than anything. The magazine spread quickly. Customers came in with copies for me to sign. Local news stations called. A business group invited me to speak at an event for women starting over after divorce. I said yes. And every time I stood in front of a room full of people, I told them the truth. I wasn't successful because I never failed. I was successful because I kept going after I did. Then, one afternoon, Daniel walked into my bakery. I recognized him immediately. He looked older. Not in a bad way. Just different. His suit was still expensive. His hair was still perfectly styled. But something about him seemed smaller than I remembered. Maybe because I wasn't small anymore. The bakery was busy that day. People were laughing. Coffee machines were humming. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon filled the room. Daniel stood near the counter, holding the magazine in his hand. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at the cover. I saw this, he said. I nodded. I guess you did. He looked around the bakery. This is impressive. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because once upon a time, those words would have meant everything to me. I would have waited for them. I would have wanted him to be proud. But standing there, surrounded by the life I built without him, I realized something. I didn't need his approval anymore. Daniel looked at me carefully. I was wrong about you, he said. There was a pause. The old Emma would have forgiven him immediately. The old Emma would have said, "It's okay." The old Emma would have tried to make him comfortable. But I wasn't that woman anymore. So I smiled politely and said, "Yes, you were." His face changed slightly. Maybe he expected anger. Maybe he expected tears. But I didn't have either for him. I had peace. He looked down at the magazine again. "I'm happy for you," he said. And for the first time, I believed he meant it. "Thank you," I replied. Then he asked, "Can I get one of those cinnamon rolls?" I looked at the display case. Of course. I placed one in a small white box and handed it to him. He paid, nodded once, and walked out. That was it. No dramatic apology. No begging. No revenge. Just a quiet ending to a chapter that had once hurt me so deeply. And strangely, it was enough. A few months later, I received a letter from Vanessa. I almost threw it away. But curiosity made me open it. She wrote that she and Daniel had separated. She said she had read the magazine article and wanted to apologize for the part she played in my pain. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said she hoped I was happy. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I placed it in a drawer. Not because I wanted to hold on to the past, but because I wanted to remember something. People can hurt you. They can betray you. They can make you question your worth. But they do not get to decide who you become. Only you do. Today, Emma's Oven has 2 locations. We employ people who are rebuilding their lives. Single mothers. Students. Women leaving difficult marriages. People who need a second chance. Every Friday, we donate leftover pastries to a local shelter. And every year, on the anniversary of the day I opened my first bakery, I make cinnamon toast for Margaret. She still comes in twice a week. She still sits near the window. And she still says it tastes like childhood. Sometimes, I look around my bakery and think about that grocery store parking lot. The $12 in my purse. The empty gas tank. The message from Daniel. The feeling that my life was over. If I could go back and speak to that version of myself, I would tell her this. You are not behind. You are not a failure. You are not too late. You are simply in the middle of your story. And the middle is often messy. It can be lonely. It can be painful. It can make you believe that nothing good is coming. But keep going. Keep showing up. Keep believing in the part of yourself that still wants more. Because one day, the same hands that wiped away tears may build something beautiful. The same heart that was broken may become stronger. And the same person who once felt invisible may finally be seen. Not by the person who hurt them, but by the world they were meant to shine in. And if someone ever calls you a failure, remember this. Their opinion is not your future. Your pain is not your ending. And your comeback does not need to be loud. Sometimes it begins quietly. With $12 in your purse. A small dream in your heart. And the courage to try one more time.